Before time was counted by man, before words were carved into stone, there was only the whisper of the wind that carried the memory of creation. It was said that the island of Java was not merely born from the earth's tremor, but from a prayer, spoken softly between heaven and the sea. Every mountain that rises, every river that flows, every forest that breathes, all were shaped not by power, but by devotion. The ancestors did not see the land as something to conquer. They saw it as something sacred, something that must be approached with respect, with heart, and with spirit. Long before the sound of machines replaced the rhythm of nature, there was harmony. Man spoke with the wind, listened to the water, and learned from the silence of the mountains. Each grain of soil was a witness to tears, to gratitude, and to the surrender of those who lived in deep connection with the unseen world. To them, life was not a possession to hold, it was a circle of returning. From soil to soul, from birth to disappearance, from light to shadow and back again. They believed that the land carried the echo of every prayer ever spoken. When one steps upon the ground, the soul of the earth listens, remembering the names of those who came before. This is the story of Babat Tanah Jawa, the sacred tale of how land and life became one. It is not merely a chronicle of how forests were cleared or villages were built. It is a remembrance of how the Javanese spirit grew from humility, from reverence, from the courage to live in balance with the mysteries of nature. In every legend of Java, there lies a truth hidden behind symbols, of mountains that guard wisdom, rivers that carry time, and stones that remember every secret whispered beneath the moon. Those who opened the land were not only farmers or wanderers, they were seekers of meaning, travelers of the unseen, keepers of harmony between man, nature, and the divine.
To open the land was to open the heart. To touch the soil was to touch the breath of God, and to live upon it was to learn the sacred art of surrender, to understand that nothing truly belongs to us, because we ourselves belong to the earth. The ancestors walked with bare feet, feeling the pulse of the ground beneath them. They offered flowers, water, and words that carried the fragrance of sincerity. They believed that before cutting a tree, one must first ask permission. Before building a home, one must first speak to the spirit of the land. For to live without respect is to live without roots. From generation to generation, these values were whispered, sung, and remembered. Even as the world changed, even as the modern age tried to silence the unseen, the spirit of Java remains, patient, calm, and eternal. It is not only found in temples or rituals, but in the quiet way someone greets the morning sun, or in the gentle act of offering water to the earth before planting a seed. In every movement, there is meaning. In every silence, there is a song. In every soul, there is a memory that once the world was sacred, that once every breath was a prayer. This narration is not just a story. It is an invitation to remember, to look again at the land beneath your feet and feel its heartbeat, to realize that long before we came, our ancestors had already spoken our names through their prayers. They planted not only rice, but hope. They built not only homes, but faith. And in their stillness, they left us a message that the earth will never forget those who walk upon it with sincerity. Let this story be your return to the land, to the silence, to the heart of the ancestors, because somewhere beneath the soil of Java, their prayers are still alive, waiting to be heard once more.
Chapter 1. When Nature Still Spoke. Before the world became loud with the noise of progress, there was a time when nature still spoke. The wind carried messages, the rain whispered secrets, and the forest kept the rhythm of life. In those days, humans did not command nature, they listened. They learned not through books or scrolls, but through rasa, the quiet language of the heart that hears what cannot be said. The ancestors of Java understood this language well. When they entered a forest, they did not rush to claim it. They stopped at the edge, bowed in silence, and offered their breath as a sign of respect. They believed that every mountain had a guardian, every tree had a spirit, and every stone held memory. To step into the wild was to step into the presence of the sacred. In that sacred stillness, man and nature shared the same pulse. The flow of the river mirrored the flow of the blood. The wind that brushed through the rice fields echoed the rhythm of breath. Life was not divided. It was one continuous prayer woven through soil, water, and sky. They called this understanding Hurip Sing Yawiji, a life that is one with the whole. And because of that unity, there was balance. Rain came when it was needed. Crops grew in harmony with the moon. Animals moved in peace among men. Even the unseen world, the spirits of the ancestors, the guardians of the land, lived by side with the living. In the nights before electricity, the sky was a field of stars, each one believed to be a window of the unseen world. Children would sit by the fire, listening to the elders tell stories about Gundung Lau, Merapi, and Semeru, not as mere mountains, but as beings of light, the pillars of the world that held balance between heaven and earth. And the elders would say, "If the mountain sleeps, we must be still. If the mountain trembles, we must pray." This was how they survived, through harmony, through awareness, through humility. To them, the earth was not a resource. It was a relative. The soil was called Ibu Bumi, the mother who gives without asking. The sky was called Bapa Angkasa, the father who watches and protects. Between the two, humans were only children, meant to care, not to control. At dawn, when the first light touched the horizon, farmers would face the rising sun, close their eyes, and murmur soft mantras, gratitude for the chance to live another day. Before planting seeds, they sprinkled water upon the soil, whispering blessings that the crop would grow in peace, not just in profit. To them, every act of survival was a ceremony, every breath a form of prayer. They believed that speech shapes reality, so words were never wasted. When one spoke with awareness, because every syllable could awaken something in the unseen. That is why Javanese language carries rhythm and softness. It was built not only to communicate with humans, but to speak to the soul of the land.
When nature still spoke, silence was sacred. One could hear the sound of a falling leaf, the cry of a bird, the murmur of the river, and know what the world was trying to say. A dry wind meant longing. A heavy mist meant blessing. Thunder was not fear. It was a reminder from the heavens that the balance must be kept. The people of that age were not perfect, but they were aware. They did not separate spirit from daily life. To work was to pray, to rest was to reflect, and to live was to serve both the visible and the invisible. The sacred was not confined in temples. It flowed through everything. As time passed, the forests began to thin, and the songs of birds grew quieter.
The wind still moved, but humans no longer listened. They had learned to count stars, but forgotten how to read their meaning. They had learned to measure the land, but not to feel its pulse. The old harmony began to fade, not because nature stopped speaking, but because humans stopped hearing. Still, deep within the soil of Java, something ancient remains. When the rain falls upon the rice fields, when mist wraps the mountain peaks, when incense rises in the morning air, the memory awakens. It is as if the land remembers the footsteps of those who once walked with reverence. The prayers of the ancestors have never left. They linger in the scent of the earth after rain, in the song of bamboo leaves swaying in the wind. To those who are still willing to listen, the voice of nature has not vanished. It speaks in the silence between breaths. It hums in the rhythm of waves against the shore. It lives in the way sunlight touches the ground, warm, forgiving, alive. But only hearts that are still can hear it. Perhaps that is why the Javanese word for to live, urip, also means to awaken. For to live is to be aware, to be present with what breathes around you. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of modern man is not that he destroys nature, but that he has forgotten that nature once spoke to him. The ancestors left no written scripture, but they left something greater, a way of living that remembers. They taught through example, through feeling, through quiet rituals performed at dawn and dusk. They showed that wisdom does not always come from knowing more, but from listening deeper. So tonight, when the wind moves through the trees, pause. When the rain begins to fall, close your eyes. When thunder rolls in the distance, do not hide. Listen. For in those sounds you may hear the same voice that spoke to the ancestors. It is the voice of the land calling you home, asking you to remember that every step you take touches something ancient, that every breath you draw is shared with the trees, the rivers, the mountains that gave you life, and that even now, when the world grows restless and loud, the sacred silence of nature still waits. Patient, gentle, eternal, hoping that one day humanity will once again learn how to listen. Chapter 2: The Prayer That Became Earth and Time. There was a moment, long before memory began, when silence was the only language the world knew. From that silence came a single breath, a whisper so gentle it carried neither sound nor form. That whisper was the first prayer, and from that prayer, the land of Java was born. The elders said, "The earth is not only made of soil and stone, it is made of words spoken by those who came before. Every mountain, every river, every grain of sand is shaped by prayers that were once uttered in faith. When the ancestors prayed, they did not pray to possess. They prayed to belong. They offered their voices not to command the world, but to become one with it. They would kneel at the edge of a forest, close their eyes, and breathe. In that breath, they felt the pulse of the earth beneath them. Their hands touched the ground as if touching the skin of a mother. Their words rose not to the sky, but into the soil, words of gratitude, surrender, and harmony.
They called it manemba, the act of bowing not only with the body, but with the soul. It was not about form or ritual, but about returning. To pray for them was to return to the source, to remember that between the dust of the earth and the dust of our being, there is no distance. When a seed was planted, a prayer was buried with it. When a child was born, a prayer was whispered into its ear. When someone died, the same prayer was returned to the wind. In this cycle, time itself was formed. The ancestors believed that time is not a line. It is a circle of prayers endlessly reborn. Thus the earth remembers. Every place where a heart once knelt, the ground softens. Every tear that fell in surrender becomes a spring. Every chant uttered in faith lingers in the wind, shaping the destiny of generations that follow. That is why in the old Javanese way, when people walk upon the land, they walk gently. They know that beneath their feet lie not just stones, but stories, prayers that have taken the shape of roots and veins of the world. And so the people lived between two realms, the visible and the invisible. The visible was the field, the mountain, the sky. The invisible was the spirit of the land, the whisper of the ancestors, the memory of their words. To live was to walk between both, aware that the boundary between seen and unseen is thinner than mist at dawn. They believed that every prayer has its own spirit. If spoken with sincerity, it becomes real. If spoken with greed, it fades into dust. That is why every offering began with rasa ikhlas, a feeling of pure intention. For without sincerity, words are only sound, but with it, words can become creation. In ancient times, there was a teaching that said, "The land listens to those who listen to themselves." So before the ancestors spoke to the earth, they fell silent. They listened to their breath, to their heartbeat, to the rhythm of life flowing through them. Only then did they dare to speak. And in that sacred exchange, the unseen became seen. Prayer became form. Faith became ground. Hope became harvest.
There was no temple made of stone, because the body itself was the temple. There was no altar carved in gold, because the land itself was the altar. To stand in the rain was to be cleansed. To walk barefoot was to be blessed. To gaze at the horizon was to remember the vastness of the soul. When storms came, they did not curse the sky. They bowed their heads, letting the wind pass through them. When drought arrived, they fasted, not as punishment, but as a way to listen deeper. Every hardship was a conversation with the unseen, every trial a way to refine the spirit. They called it Laku, the living path, a way of walking through time with awareness, patience, and devotion. It was said that those who lived by this path could hear what others could not. They could sense the language of rain, the sadness of a dying tree, the gratitude of the soil after it was watered. One story tells of a hermit who prayed in silence for 40 days beside a mountain spring. He asked not for power, not for gold, but for understanding. When the 40 days ended, he looked down, and where his tears had fallen, a small stream had begun to flow. The villagers called it Kalidoa, the river of prayer, and until this day its water never dries. That story was not told to amaze. It was told to remind that the smallest act of sincerity done in harmony with nature can shape the world beyond what the eyes can see. That time itself bends to the will of those who live with faith.
In this understanding, the past, present, and future are not separated. They are one long breath of prayer, exhaled by the ancestors, inhaled by the living, and passed on to the unborn. This is why Javanese philosophy says, Sapaheling bakal urip. He who remembers shall live. For remembrance is the root of all prayers. The more one forgets, the heavier life becomes. The more one remembers, the lighter the path unfolds. When prayer becomes earth, life becomes sacred. When prayer becomes time, even death becomes a doorway, not an end, but a return. In every piece of land that was once opened by the ancestors, you can still feel their devotion. If you walk through the rice fields at dawn, you might hear it, the soft echo of chanting beneath the sound of frogs and flowing water. It is not imagination, it is memory, memory carried in the breath of the earth itself. The elders said, "If you listen closely enough, the land will pray with you." And perhaps that is the secret that the modern world has forgotten, that prayer was never meant to be shouted toward the heavens, but whispered into the soil. For the divine is not far above, it is right beneath our feet. The land is alive because it was once spoken to with love. The rivers still flow because they remember the gratitude once sung to them. And time itself still moves because of the prayers that continue to be whispered by wind, by rain, by those who still live with awareness. If you ever stand in silence upon the hills of Java, feel the wind upon your skin. Close your eyes and listen. That trembling you feel, it is not fear, it is recognition. The land remembers you, because in another time, in another form, you were part of the same prayer that made this earth. Everything is connected, the soil, the soul, the stars. And when we finally remember this truth, the world will heal itself. For the prayer that became earth and time still breathes within us, waiting to be spoken again.
Chapter 3. Laku, Tirakat, and the Silent Path to the Divine. In the stillness of the Javanese night, when the stars hang low above the dark silhouette of the mountains, there is a silence that speaks, not with words, but with presence. It is in this silence that the Laku, the sacred way of self-discipline and surrender, begins. It is not a path walked with the body alone, but a pilgrimage of the soul, a journey from noise to stillness, from ego to essence, from the seen to the unseen. The ancestors called it Tirakat, the art of restraining the flesh so the spirit could awaken. In the heart of Java, this practice was never about ascetic pride or mere ritual. It was a dialogue between the human and the cosmos, between the breath and the eternal. Fasting, sleepless nights, silence, solitude, these were not punishments, but instruments of clarity. Through Laku, one learns to listen again, to the whisper of wind that carries divine rhythm, to the murmur of rivers that remember ancient prayers. To walk the Javanese path of Laku is to understand that wisdom is not collected from books, but distilled from life itself. The rice farmer who bows to the earth each dawn, the sculptor who carves wood with devotion, the dancer who moves in harmony with gamelan, all are performing Laku. It is a living philosophy that every act, when done with sincerity, becomes a form of worship. There are nights when the seeker feels the vastness of loneliness, when the world withdraws its warmth, and all that remains is the echo of one's own breath. Yet even in this solitude,
there is a sacred company. The ancestors who once walked barefoot through this same soil, their spirits still lingering in the pulse of the land. They do not speak in sentences, but in sensations. A sudden wind, a flicker of incense flame, a dream that feels more real than waking life. On this silent path, Laku becomes not only a practice, but a way of being. It is the art of living in alignment with nature, with time, with destiny. It is the discipline of keeping one's inner lamp lit, even when the world grows dark. And as the seeker continues walking, he realizes the divine was never distant. It was always here, waiting, patient, within his very breath. In the Javanese philosophy of life, there is no separation between the visible and invisible worlds. The ancestors are not gone, they are simply residing in another layer of reality, whispering through symbols, dreams, and intuition. When one practices Laku with sincerity, the veil thins and the sacred presence becomes palpable. The body may still walk on earth, but the soul begins to dance between realms. And perhaps this is the final secret of Babat Tanah Jawa, that the land itself is alive, not as metaphor, but as memory. Every hill holds a story, every river a prayer, every breeze a message from the unseen. To walk upon this soil is to step upon centuries of devotion. To live here consciously is to inherit the responsibility of balance between the modern and the mystical, between progress and reverence. As the dawn breaks, the seeker rises from meditation. His face glows not with pride, but with peace. The world remains the same, yet his eyes have changed. He no longer seeks miracles, because he has become one, a living bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the ancient and the eternal. And in that sacred realization, silent, profound, unspoken, the journey returns to its beginning. The path dissolves into stillness. The stillness dissolves into awareness. The awareness dissolves into the one. This is the Laku, to walk in silence, to surrender in patience, and to see the divine in every breath that fills the lungs of this sacred land. For in the end, Java is not merely a place, it is a prayer that never ends. On this silent path, Laku becomes not only a practice, but a way of being. It is the art of living in alignment with nature, with time, with destiny. It is the discipline of keeping one's inner lamp lit, even when the world grows dark. And as the seeker continues walking, he realizes the divine was never distant. It was always here, waiting, patient, within his very breath. In the Javanese philosophy of life, there is no separation between the visible and invisible worlds. The ancestors are not gone, they are simply residing in another layer of reality, whispering through symbols, dreams, and intuition. When one practices Laku with sincerity, the veil thins and the sacred presence becomes palpable. The body may still walk on earth, but the soul begins to dance between realms. And perhaps this is the final secret of Babat Tanah Jawa, that the land itself is alive, not as metaphor, but as memory. Every hill holds a story, every river a prayer, every breeze a message from the unseen. To walk upon this soil is to step upon centuries of devotion.
To live here consciously is to inherit the responsibility of balance between the modern and the mystical, between progress and reverence. As the dawn breaks, the seeker rises from meditation. His face glows not with pride, but with peace. The world remains the same, yet his eyes have changed. He no longer seeks miracles because he has become one, a living bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the ancient and the eternal. And in that sacred realization, silent, profound, unspoken, the journey returns to its beginning. The path dissolves into stillness. The stillness dissolves into awareness. The awareness dissolves into the One. This is the Laku, to walk in silence, to surrender in patience, and to see the divine in every breath that fills the lungs of this sacred land. For in the end, Java is not merely a place, it is a prayer that never ends.